guys, so today I want to talk about stage presence. It's something that I think is incredibly important, something that I have really worked on in my own playing and really tried to create a stage presence that I am really comfortable with and really proud of. And I wanted to share some of my thoughts with you guys. First off, why is stage presence important? For me, the major thing is it's part of what captivates you in a live performance. It's part of what makes live performance worthwhile and why I want to go to a concert rather than just listening to a recording or like putting on a YouTube video. Having that presence in the hall changes things. It's not just listening to the music. And yes, live performance also does have other aspects of difference where acoustics are different and there's a lot of other things that can happen there. But one of the biggest things is like watching a performer get on stage and own every second of what they're doing. And there are a variety of different ways that can happen. It's not all pure confidence, I don't think, but every great performer I have ever seen has walked on stage and no one could look away. And I think that's something that is very, very powerful and can even boost your performance skill before you're playing. Has that even met that standard? Obviously, you do have to play well for people to feel that you're a fantastic performer, but I do feel like stage presence can bolster a weaker performance sometimes. Or a performance that was maybe 80% there can get an extra 5, maybe 10% if the performer had incredible stage presence. So, what are the things that you should or shouldn't do? And the biggest thing that's a no for me is apologize for being there. There's this discomfort on stage that I see a lot, where people feels like to the audience that the performer doesn't know that they should be in this position. And so they're allowing the audience to see that fear and also see that discomfort. And that's really hard to get over. It absolutely is. It's not necessarily stage fright, it's just imposter syndrome and 1,000 other things that are causing it to be hard to be comfortable in the situation you are. It could be that you're performing in a new space. It could be that you're performing with a new tech setup. It could be that you're performing with tech at all. You could be performing on an iPad for the first time. There's so many different things that can throw you off a little bit and cause your performance shield to break down a little bit. That's something that's really hard to break through, especially when it's something that is a new experience to you. You haven't been able to practice it. And that's where simulation of performance is super important. Personally, I always do at least a dress rehearsal and sometimes even just my entire run up to a concert with new tech in the shoes I'm gonna wear. And that seems really small, but for me, it puts me into that performance mode of owning my space and having to be as comfortable with my body movement as I have to be in performance. A lot of you guys know I almost exclusively perform in heels, and that's a confidence thing for me. For me, I feel better and more like I'm going to go out to play in heels. It is something that I've had to practice a lot, but it means that when I step out on stage, I feel good and I feel comfortable and I feel like even just that first step, I know what I'm doing. And the prep that was required of that is that I have to know that I can walk in these shoes, I can play in these shoes, I can do all the things that I want to in these shoes, and all of the technology that I'm using, if that's the case, is going to work in these shoes. So simulating that performance before I ever step on the actual stage is really, really helpful. And then definitely sound check or dress rehearsal or any, like the last time I'm going to play the piece before the performance is always in the shoes I'm gonna wear. And I know that seems like a really trivial thing, but it just puts me into the performance mode. And that's like a little trigger that I've built into my brain essentially of like, okay, we're wearing the heels, we're into this. And that allows me to practice before I'm actually in that position. For me, most of my stage presence comes from an interest in getting to the point where I get to share the music. I'm not trying to get the walking on stage claps as long as I can. I'm looking to get on stage and get things done. And that provides an energy to the audience that I think works pretty well. And I have heard from other people that it does as well. But that kind of impetus to get on stage makes people think that I am a very confident performer. Even when I'm in a situation where I'm nervous or something awkward has happened, I'm still going to make sure that I walk out on stage, take a bow, and then get to business. And these are all things that are very personal to me and may not work for you, but finding a way to get to the point where you're playing the music that doesn't apologize for your existence is really important. Never apologize. You were there for a reason, and you were there because you were meant to be there. And no matter what you may have running through your head, you need to own that stage. And you can obviously make mistakes in that. Obviously, this is not something that I've always been good at. I'm sure there's many old recordings of performances of mine somewhere on the internet where I don't have that kind of energy. But it's something that also is worthwhile looking back on. Like, if you have old videos, look back and go, oh, okay, that looked awkward, I looked uncomfortable, and then adjust. One of the wonderful things about being a musician in this era is that we can record everything so easily. Whereas you used to have all of the like technology to be able to record it. Most of us have at least a phone in our pockets that can give you decent video. Audio is a different story, but at least you can see what this looks like. And that's super helpful. And then you get to the actual performance side of things. And that still matters. I'm not saying that you have to be dancing around the stage. You don't have to be moving everywhere. But I do think that some level of movement is helpful. If you're just standing there like a statue, honestly, that looks most of the time like fear. Obviously instrument dependent and situation dependent, but I do think a little bit of movement, like maybe backwards and forwards on an axis that doesn't necessarily interrupt your instrument. Obviously, like I'm thinking of flute in this particular regard because that's the instrument I know, but the same way that like I talk with my hands a lot, I move a lot. And it gives a more engaging like show to the audience, and it also keeps people locked onto you because they're interested in what you're doing. One of the other things is I kind of see performers like where their shoulders get really tense and like they're shrinking. They're shrinking back from the audience rather than like dropping their shoulders and playing with good posture, to be honest, and presenting like a confident front to the audience. And that's something that I noticed really quickly when players are seemingly uncomfortable, and it may not be discomfort, it may just be the way they play, it looks awkward, and it looks like, again, the performer is apologizing for being on stage, and that's not great. We don't want that. So I have little things that I do, especially when things are getting hard in the music, because I do definitely scrunch shoulders, and anyone who's ever seen me mad knows that my shoulders will creep up and up. So it's not something that like is natural to me, but I'll put little markers in my score to just like take a second and relax. Like not necessarily visibly, but just a little note for me to be like, okay, hold on, chill. It's also something that really helps my playing, because if I'm really tense going into a very hard section, it's not going to go as well as if I'm relaxed and like flowing with the music. But it also does help stage presence. Last thing that I want to talk about is the end. Imagine that. Definitely always take your bow, like take it properly. Don't just like awkwardly half bow and then run away. That's a really obvious way to tell that the person is really nervous and really uncomfortable and wants to get off stage immediately. But I would also say that if you were playing a piece by a living composer, remember to acknowledge them. One of the things that I see a lot in my world is performers running off stage before acknowledging the person that is in the room that wrote the piece that you just performed. And that to me ruins a lot of the stage presence you may have had up until that point, because one, I find it kind of rude, and two, I am then very aware that all you wanted to do at the end of that piece was get off stage. It's also like good and human to acknowledge the collaborator that you were working with on this music, especially if they're in the room. It's very weird when it doesn't happen and there's like a kind of murmur that happens in the audience. And so it's not necessarily like a stage presence thing, but it definitely does color the opinion of the performance and how you performed if the last thing that they remember of you is you not acknowledging the composer that was like literally there. So yeah, I think the moral of the story is like, don't apologize for being there. You were meant to be there and you should be on stage, and you want people to see what you're about to do and make them watch. Yeah, I hope this was helpful in some way. It's kind of hard to talk about this as like a hard and fast rules, because not everyone has the same stage presence or the same like tactics, but it is something that is definitely worthwhile thinking about in your own performance. As I said, go back and watch video and see whether you were apologizing for being on stage or whether you were owning it, and adjust. It's a process, and it's something that like I know for a fact that I will still be thinking about 20, 30, 40 years down the line, but it's something that if you aren't thinking about, you definitely need to start. As always, if you guys like this video, give it a like. If you're new here, subscribe, and I will see you guys soon.